welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Emiko Jean is a New York Times bestselling author of adult and young adult fiction, whose books have been published in over 30 languages. Her YA novel Tokyo Ever After was a Reese Witherspoon Hello Sunshine book club pick, and her adult novel Mika in Real Life was featured on Good Morning America as a GMA book club pick. Her latest novel, The Return of Ellie Black, is her first adult thriller. Emiko lives in Washington with her husband and 2 kids. Emiko Jean, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on your new novel, your first adult thriller, The Return of Ellie Black.
Thank you.
Publishers Weekly says YA bestseller Jean makes a smooth transition to adult fiction with this atmospheric and surprise-packed thriller. With shocking twists and style to spare, this confirms Jean as a writer worth seeking out. Kirkus Reviews says Jean has written an impressive crime novel here. An unexpected ending and a cadre of heroic female characters make Jean a crime writer to watch. Author Stephen King says The Return of Ellie Black is a page-turning suspense novel, a shrewd character study, and a captivating mystery. The last 50 pages are magnetic. I couldn't put it down. And author Jessica Knoll says, I stayed up late into the night turning the pages until I learned the truth of what happened to Ellie on the day that she went missing. And I audibly gasped when Jean delivered a truly jaw-dropping twist. I could go on, but we'll stop there so we can actually have a conversation. So with that, I know we don't want to give any spoilers, but what can you tell us about The Return of Ellie Black?
Yeah, and thank you for that really lovely introduction. So The Return of Ellie Black subverts the missing, like the classic missing girl narrative. The story begins with Chelsea Calhoun, a small town Japanese American police detective, receiving a phone call that Ellie Black, a teen that went missing more than 2 years ago, has mysteriously resurfaced in the woods of Washington state. So we start the novel with the return of a missing girl. And now Chelsea finally has this chance to solve a cold case that has always haunted her. And it should be open and shut, Chelsea's investigation turns out to be anything but that. She's left with far more questions than answers, mainly who took Ellie Black and why won't Ellie talk about her experience? And then eventually she's asking, what is Ellie hiding? As Chelsea kind of digs deeper into Ellie's history and her behavior, which is very suspicious, Chelsea kind of runs headlong into demons from her own past, unresolved grief over her murdered sister, and the subsequent fracturing of her family. The novel is told primarily from Chelsea's point of view, but we get flashes of other perspectives, those close to Ellie, and then we get a firsthand past account from Ellie herself. So there's a past-present narrative happening too. It's a book about trauma and survival and what it means to be a woman in a world with violent men.
Yeah. What was the catalyst for this one? For what got you started on this idea?
Yeah, so I do remember, like, the pivotal inspiration point was I had this image of a girl racing through the forest, and that image eventually became the opening scene for the book. So we see Ellie and she's in a forest, and we're not quite sure what happened to her, but she has some definite disturbing things about her. Her clothes are dirty and there's blood on her clothes. And then she finds these 2 hikers and she says, My name's Ellie Black, I think I'm missing. And so that was the image that it started with.
Mhm.
And the story evolved from there. And I never really understood, and this happens a lot with my books. I don't ever really understand why I'm drawn to writing about them until after the work is finished.
Mhm.
Um, and I realize now as I look back that I've been, I mean, I've always liked true crime, but specifically I've always been interested in true crime stories about kidnapped victims who've returned,
Mhm.
like Elizabeth Smart and Amanda Berry. Um, and at first I kind of questioned, I was like, why am I so fascinated by these stories? Like, should I be worried about myself here? But
It's fascinating.
it's interesting, and and now that I've kind of examined it, I realized that I was interested in the endurance of the human spirit, like how
Mhm.
someone can survive something that might have otherwise killed them. And, you know, and as a woman, you know, women fall victim to, you know, to men like this. And I think it's also a way of us kind of studying how to survive, like how
Yeah.
to not be killed. And so, yeah, I've just always, and I think that's why I was so driven to write this story.
This is your first adult thriller.
Mhm.
You've had great success in writing YA as well as adult fiction outside of the thriller genre. Um, you said you got this flash of the girl running through the woods, but what made you decide that you were ready to just switch it up for this one and
Yeah.
transition over to write a thriller?
Yeah. So the big secret here is that this book was going to be a young adult book. So
Okay.
when I first started writing, my first young adult novel was a thriller.
Mhm.
And this was supposed to be the follow-up to that. So I was going to write two thrillers. And I turned it in, and my editor said, this is not, you know, this is not what we kind of want, and stuff like that, which was heartbreaking at the time. But now that I realized, you know, soon after I kind of figured out that this was an adult book, that the story that I was telling was meant for adults and had more adult themes in it. So the switch might seem like it was kind of a left turn, but it's been building for a long time. So um, while I was working on other projects, this one was always kind of off on the side, and I was thinking about it and kind of lightly revising it. And then it wasn't until about last year or 2 years ago, um, it kind of crystallized for me that I should have the multiple perspectives. And that was
Mhm.
the last missing piece to the book, because originally I had written from Ellie's point of view. The entire book, so the past and present, was written from her entire point of view. And then
Wow.
I did Ellie's point of view and Chelsea's point of view. And then I did Ellie's point of view, Chelsea's point of view, and then the other point of views. And so
Mhm.
that was kind of the last missing puzzle piece. And that was when I felt like the book was ready to be resubmitted. Yeah, so it's been a long time coming, and it's purely reflective of what I enjoy reading. So I love reading young adult. I like reading romance too, but I
Yeah.
also like to read, you know, dark thrillers.
Yeah. The nice propulsive, pacey
Yeah,
plots.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I do too. I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the POVs, the point of views.
Mhm,
And so you said that sort of crystallized for you at the end. Were you
mhm,
kind of how did it crystallize? Were you because as you've said, now we get Ellie's point of view from past tense,
mhm.
sort of, and then we're in present tense, in Chelsea's point of view and in a few others. So when it crystallized for you that you wanted to use these different POVs, was that to sort of solve a problem for you for getting the story told correctly and in the structure? And how did that come about?
Yeah, that was all plot driven. So
Mhm.
I realized that I had the themes that I wanted, and I had the character arcs that I wanted. And so
Mhm.
those all felt really established.
Mhm.
And again, I mean, writing a pacey thriller is so hard.
Mhm.
Writing one with hints and clues and everything is so hard. And I wanted Ellie to be able to tell more of her story and give more hints about where she'd been in the
Mhm.
present timeline. And so bringing in those people that are close to Ellie and having their point of views and they're interacting with Ellie at home. Um, if you kind of go back through the novel, there's a hint in each chapter from those point of views that Ellie's dropping about where she's been and what she's kind of up to. Not to give any spoilers away,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
um, and so, because when, she's so standoffish with Chelsea in the book, she doesn't want to talk, but I still wanted her to have a voice in the present timeline.
yeah,
And so, creating these other point of views was my way of kind of giving her that voice.
yeah, it worked out beautifully.
Thank you.
You you mentioned, exploring the themes that you explored in this book, and we've
Mhm.
talked about the different genres. While you write in different genres, you do kind of explore similar themes. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, especially in adults. So if you do look at kind of my body of work, it does seem like, oh, she wrote a YA romance and then she wrote like she wrote Mika in Real Life, which is like fiction about adoption, and now there's this thriller. So it looks on the surface very disjointed. But there are some threads that remain the same. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is um, writing about what it means to be a yellow body in America and all of those
Mm,
experiences that it encapsulates. And, so of course I would write about love and also, survival and adoption, all these kinds of different things, because it's a big experience. I don't think I'll
yeah,
ever, be finished writing about what it means to be Japanese American in the United States. And and second to that, I'm really interested in trauma. So if you look at Mika in Real Life, it talks a lot about intergenerational trauma, um, which is something that I've explored in my own personal life. So that's obvious why that came through in that novel. And then trauma is another big theme in The Return of Ellie Black. It's I'm so interested in how trauma can chemically alter someone and
yeah,
having my own experiences again with trauma. I've just learned how you can carry trauma in your body and pass it down,
mm,
and and but also exploring kind of what happens after trauma and how we heal from it. And that's kind of what I wanted to bring Ellie to, at the end of the book is, how we learn, to live with our trauma, but also be hopeful at the same time.
yeah. And in researching for Ellie Black, you talk to victims as well as police detectives. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was really fortunate to interview, excuse me, a lot of people for this novel. I interviewed seasoned law enforcement officers, like DNA analysis analysts, local detectives, and I was even able to talk with a former FBI agent. Um, and they all asked to remain anonymous. So I can't even properly thank them for playing such a pivotal part in the book. But um, in chatting with them, I got to know like the logistical side of police work and the physical and emotional toll it takes, which I think comes through in Chelsea's point of view. She really brings the work home from, with her. And that was common in all of these detective and FBI agents' stories that they
Oh,
bring it
yeah.
home with them. They live with these these people. Um, One FBI agent that I interviewed, he worked in domestic terrorism and was at Ruby Ridge.
Oh, wow.
And that he became kind of the touchstone for Chelsea's character, but also to a smaller degree, another detective in the book, Detective Montoya, who Chelsea works
Mm,
with in the book.
mhm,
Um, and then, other than that, I also spent a long time in Long Beach, Washington, where the novel was inspired by.
mhm,
And I spent a long time on a fishing boat there to study for so Ellie's dad, her dad is he's a fisherman,
mhm.
and I really wanted to get the feel for what that life is like, and I was
Yeah.
fortunate to have a distant family member that owns a fishing boat, and I got to spend the day with him out on the boat, and he became the inspiration for Ellie's dad, Jimmy, in the book.
How did you know that you wanted to write about this town? You said Coldwell is the name of the fictional town in the book, and it's based on Long Beach, Washington, right?
Yeah.
What about Long Beach drew you in?
So I've been visiting Long Beach for a long time. We have some family that's from there, and so we would go on vacation often there during the summers and sometimes in the fall and spring. But um, if you're familiar, which I wouldn't expect you to be, with like the geography of Washington, Long
I
Beach,
personally am not.
you're not? I'm shocked. So it's a very long, thin strip of land,
Mhm,
and there's only one way in and one way out. And many years ago, there was an article published, I believe it was in the New York Times, don't quote me on this, but
mhm.
about how someday a mega earthquake will strike the Pacific Northwest, and a tsunami will incur, and it will wipe out a lot of the West Coast. And Long Beach, in particular, would be completely obliterated if this ever happened. It would be
Wow.
all underwater, um, which naturally freaked me out because I've been going there for a long time.
Yeah, as it would.
But, um, but then it lent itself so nicely to the book because I liked the idea of all of these characters kind of growing up and there always being this looming existential threat,
Yeah,
which I thought paired nicely, with the survival theme in the book.
yeah, yeah, it works beautifully. You have a hypothesis about why women in particular are
Mhm.
fascinated with true crime. And it plays in well with the issues that are explored in Ellie Black. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So like I said before, I've been really fascinated with true crime. And if you look, I mean, if you research it, I think it's like 80% of the readers of true crime or, consumers of true crime, like
Mhm,
any type of media is women. And I believe it's because, women are often the victims of these heinous acts. And,
mhm,
studying true crime is a way we learn how not to be killed. I also think we deeply empathize with the victims too, because we can see ourselves, being one of them.
mhm.
Um, and then there's also like the adrenaline component. Like they're fun reads, right? Like
Yeah,
it's twisty. There's you want to know what happens. There's page turning, but I think what keeps us coming back to that um is that the biggest, threat to women, if you Google search it, is violence by men. If you Google search the biggest threat to men, it's like heart disease and stuff like that. So the biggest health threat to women really is it's violent men.
wow. It's funny that you mentioned that because I do notice sometimes, you're scrolling through looking for something to watch or, reading and dipping in to read something true crime related. And I do find myself often thinking, oh, I need to pay attention just to file this away just in case I need like escape tips ever,
Yeah. Mhm.
which is something I don't think probably that men do as much to your point. Um, how did you come to writing? Have you always been a writer?
I've always liked writing, and I remember doing well in school with writing, when you had to take the state tests, and
Hmm.
there was that writing portion, I remember. my mom being like, "Ah, you scored pretty well on this," and that kind of being like a question, like, but um, uh, I didn't come to it until later in life. I was a pretty voracious reader, like I think most writers are.
Mhm.
A lot of people are. And I loved reading from a really young age, but I never read anything by a Japanese American author, and I never read anything with a Japanese featuring a Japanese American character. And so I believe that that was kind of subconsciously turned off for me. So I didn't, while I love to read, I didn't feel like I could pursue a career in publishing because there was no representation there.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and so at a very young age, I'd been kind of erased from the thing that I loved the most.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and so, and even when I published my first book, I published it with a white character because I didn't think someone like me that looked like me would be published, would be. Um,
Wow.
so after that, I was much more intentional because once I had kind of had a footing and believed in myself a little bit more and trusted the publishing world a little bit more,
Mhm.
I cast Japanese or Japanese American characters into my novels. So it took a long time to come to writing. I tried a lot of different jobs.
Mhm.
I skipped around a lot because I hadn't found my thing yet.
Yeah.
And I remember I was working a job that I was deeply unhappy at, and I would be in the office, and I would open up my email, and I would pretend to be typing an email, but I was really writing chapters into a book. So
Wow.
it really started as, I think, a way, to kind of escape from that.
Mhm.
And so eventually that became a novel, a really terrible novel that never was published. But that's kind of when I got the taste for it, and when I decided that I wanted to be intentional with writing and really try to make a career out of it. Um, and I did I was foolish and bold, but I was like, I remember I quit my job and I announced it, which I like you should
That's great.
announced it, and I was like, "I quit my job because I'm gonna write a book, and I want," and everybody was very worried, and they should have been because it took a couple more years after that, but, uh, yeah, enough, and the rest is kind of history.
Well, what was the road to publication like for you? So you quit your job and you got started and
Mhm,
you've got those 2 years when you're writing, and
mhm.
then how did you actually get the first one published?
So to correct that, I wrote a novel, and while I was working, and I got an agent, and so I quit after I got the agent because I thought that I had, like, made it
Oh,
after
well,
I got an agent.
that's solid though, yeah.
So, to be fair, I was, still working full-time and writing in the evenings, so that was kind of, um, you know, it was difficult. I was working full-time, so and then I would come home, I'd eat dinner, and then I would write for 3 to 4 hours a night,
Wow. Mhm.
and, and that was hard, but, it's not as hard as it has been having now that I have kids and I'm trying to write, which is a different whole different, animal in itself. But, um, yeah, so after I submitted that novel, that I had been working on at night, and I got an agent, and I thought that we were gonna submit it, but she's the same agent I have now, a very editorial agent, and so she sent me, a very long editorial letter. The like, I think it was 12 or 20 pages. I should look it up someday again. And I didn't really even know about, like, revision, that writers revise
Mhm.
their books. I had a very romantic idea about what it meant to be a writer, and, I had the vision of, like, the movie vision where you go to a cafe and you write, and you struggle for a minute, but it's mostly with your ideas, and
Mhm.
then you turn it in and it gets published, but, um, I wasn't ready for the hard work.
Mm.
And, also, I wasn't ready, I don't think, to feel kind of so stripped down. I mean,
Mm.
once you receive that first editorial letter, you essentially feel like very naked.
Mhm.
And I heard one writer say it's like being naked on like a doctor's examination table, and they're gonna like look at every mole and tell you what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's how it feels. Um, and so it took me a while to kind of to read through that editorial letter line by line, and we revised the novel for about 2 years before we submitted it. Um, and I remember feeling really frustrated at times, and then once we submitted it, um, the reads went pretty fast. I think it was only out on submission for a couple weeks, and it went to auction, which was
Oh,
great.
wow.
So it was really exciting, but it was really, um, I'm not sure how to describe it now, but you kind of think that I thought that I had like really made it once you got a publishing deal and stuff, but it's really, you just go back and you kind of do the same thing over and over again. You write a book, you get another letter, and it's kind of rinse, wash, and repeat. Um, but I remember being very excited, but I also, now looking back, remember being very, not age young, but just young in the sense of the publishing process.
What do you know now that you wish you had known then?
Um, I wish, and this is actually something that my agent told me, but it's advice I did not take, which was not to rest on your laurels and to keep writing.
Mm,
So during those first couple books, I kind of hung out in between them. Like, I didn't write,
mhm,
and I wish that I had kept writing and kind of built up more of a back catalog.
mm,
Um, but I'm also kind of a person that believes in, everything is meaningful. So I feel that all the lessons that I learned along the way are meaningful and
mhm.
have helped me. I don't think I would have the books that I have now if I hadn't learned those lessons too.
Yeah.
Um, but I do wish I had taken her advice to just to kind of keep writing, because I think you can get overly focused on the publishing part and the audience part and the reception and the
Mhm.
success and things like that. Um, but those are nice, but in the terms of being fulfilled as a writer, it's really the writing that fills you up. And so I wish that I had listened to that way back when.
What is your writing routine like now?
Yeah, so I had twins 6 years ago. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
I used to be a nighttime is the right time to write.
Mhm.
And but children are awake mostly during the day,
Mm,
after a certain age. And so I've adjusted my schedule. I'm a 9 to 5 writer. So I wake up, I see the kids off to school, and then I'm in the office by 8 a.m. And I usually like hang out and look at notes and drink tea and sometimes look at YouTube. And then I'm drafting uh, by 9. And I usually have like certain goals that I set for myself. So if I'm drafting a book, it's like 500 words an hour I try to write. If I'm revising, I have like one chapter per day. It all depends kind of what the demand is for the revision, but I've had to be I've had to really use my time that I have. I had to be more intentional with my time since having the kids. And then I usually like take a walk at the end of the day to kind of transition out of the writing, the dark story that I'm trying to
mhm.
tell, and then get ready to be a parent again.
Does does anything change in your routine or your methodology, depending on what genre you're working on?
Yeah, not necessarily routine wise, but I do find there's a certain ease that comes with writing like contemporary YA rom-coms.
Mhm,
Um, I've done a couple of those, now, and so I think my confidence level is a little bit higher with
mhm.
those. Um, not that they're easy to write, but I feel more practiced in them.
Yeah.
Um, so those are kind of like the breath between writing a dark thriller, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, it does
So
make
I kind of I tend to juggle. So I'll kind of write a dark thriller or like another fiction novel, and then I go to young adult, and there's kind of this nice ebb and flow that happens where
Yeah.
I can write something that's really intense, and then I can go to something that's a little bit lighter.
Yeah. Are you a plotter or a pantser or a mix of both?
I'm a pretty hardcore plotter.
Cool.
Yeah, so I know. I won't go into a book without a really serious outline. So I take about like 6 to 8 months where I just think about a novel. So if I have an idea, I let it sit, I let it percolate, and then I take a copious amount of notes on my phone. So
Mhm.
and the notes can be anything from dialogue to scenes to character traits, anything like that. And then once I feel like that's exhausted, I go in and I create an outline and I start plugging in those notes, like where the scene will go. Um, so when I am outlining a book and when I'm ready to start writing it, I know the character arc, I know where they're starting, I know where I want them to end, and
Mm.
I know, the whole plot, like what's going to happen in act 1, act 2, act 3.
Mhm.
Um, but that doesn't I thought it would save me from revisions, and it has cut down the number of revisions, but
Mhm.
there's always I think because with my first book, I probably did like 20 passes, and now I'm at probably like, you know, 6 revisions before a novel is ready.
Wow.
So I have cut down on that by being more intentional on the outset, but I've never written anything that I've turned in and they've been like, "This is great." No.
I wonder if anyone has.
I would be so interested to hear that.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that's like it's not the case. But yeah, so I have cut down on the amount of revisions, but there usually is a good 6 to 8 passes of any novel.
But it sounds like there is still that period of time where it's just scenes that are coming
Mhm.
to you and you're sort of gathering all of that and kind of letting it all percolate, and then a plot sort of starts to come together
Yeah,
here. Would
yeah,
you
you're
say?
right. So in that sense, it does feel more Panzer-esque. And I'll even just sometimes I'll write down like words that I like the sound of.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, cool.
yeah, I'm writing right now like a little short story, and um, the I've been paying more attention to the words because you have so
Mhm.
fewer of them. I don't know if that's a grammatically correct sentence, but so yeah, it's sparse. It's
If you
sparse.
say it is, it is.
Okay. And and he's a religious man, and so I've been thinking about the way to use religious terms, like his life was ordained by like children and gardening and things like that. So using like religious text in a different way, but that's kind of the lens through which he sees the world.
Mhm.
And so I do that too a lot with different, like with Mika in real life, she was an artist, so thinking about um her vocabulary, like how she would explain
Yeah.
and interpret the world.
Yeah. How far ahead do you work? Because I know you've got at least one more novel that you're working on now, and it sounds like a short story as
Mhm.
well. So how far ahead are you working? How many projects are you working on at one time?
Yeah, so since we sold Ellie Black, I have written 2 novels.
Wow.
So it's been about a year, and I wrote a young adult novel right after Ellie Black.
Mhm.
And then Ellie Black has a second book. So I just finished that and I'm in the process of revising it. So it's always kind of weird and wild to, to do these interviews, and because by the time like a book is publishing, I've already been working on something else, so I kind of have to return like, oh yeah, that is what I did do that. I did write that thing. Um, but yeah, so those are all up and coming in the next couple years, and I have something that I'm hoping to start this summer, and I've been fiddling around with this short story. I don't know what it is yet, but um, I've been writing some lines in
That's great. I'm excited for all of it.
it. Thank you.
Traditional last question
Sure.
on the podcast has to do with music. When The Return of Ellie Black is made into a movie or series,
Mhm.
what do you think the theme song should be?
So I actually have an answer for this one. I think if you were going to ask me about any other book, I would struggle. I do tend to have like a theme song that I listen, like it's kind of a Pavlovian response. Like as soon as I listen to the song, it's like I'm in with the characters, I'm in the mood to write, in the mood of the novel. And the song that was kind of the anthem for Ellie Black was called If You Leave Me. I
Mhm.
can't remember. Let me see if I can look it up really quick. The artist. It is I have it on my playlist. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's called Keep Me in Your Heart by Warren Zevon.
Cool. Okay, I don't know
Yeah.
that one, but now I'm gonna look it up and
Yeah.
listen.
And the line, there's a line in it that's like, if you leave me, it doesn't mean I love you any less. And I actually wanted that to be the title of the book, was If You Leave Me, but we decided to go with The Return of Ellie Black. We thought that um it was a little bit more commercial and kind of captured the story a little bit better.
Mhm.
But that was the song that always kind of drove me towards the story.
Well, that's great. Now I have a new song to go and listen to.
Yeah,
We all
I know
do.
it's an old. I don't know when did it come out? It's an old song. It's kind of folksy, if you like folksy
Oh,
music.
that sounds great. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
forward.
yeah.
Emiko Jean, thank you so much for coming on. It has been so much fun talking with you, and The Return of Ellie Black is amazing. Everyone should read it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me and reading.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.